Hi, and welcome everyone to the GreenZone. This is episode 5, and today we've got a lot of things to talk about, so we're going to get right into it. I'd like to introduce my co-host, my wingman, Adam Kahn, as well. Adam, what do you have for us?
Well, I'm chock full with information today, but I'm excited to have Barrett on the Barrett from ABC Supply, who's joining us today. We're talking about blind spots, and not necessarily like as we are all wearing, blind spot, visors on our eyes, but things that we know that are out there that we're just not able to see. It was interesting, Adam. I started the conversation and I started thinking about this today. And as I was doing some research, as always, I'm going to give you a fun fact. I was looking at an article about some of the early delivery mechanisms for the United States Postal Service. And what struck me on this, and just bear with me because usually these are like we diverge and then we come back on focus. But the article read did you know how like the 5-digit code now 9-digit code was originated, right? So it all talked about like the delivery of where deliveries were going, which I really felt some parallels of like the blind spot into deliveries and now having some direction to the United States Postal Service. But the piece that was highlighted in the article back in 1910, 1915, early 20th century, the Postal Service was used mainly for like the shipping mechanism, right? So before all the trucking companies were out there, the Postal Service was the main sense of transport. And a lot of it was produce. But in some cases, people were shipping their children because it was cheaper than putting them on a train. So talking about blind spot and sending, not knowing what's going to happen, that certainly drew some parallels into this conversation. Now, Barrett, I know that we're not shipping children, and you have a whole different delivery mechanism for ABC Supply. But certainly, I'm excited. I've been to your facility; it's beautiful. All the shops are. I think I could probably eat lunch off the floor. All the shops there and all the offices are pristine. So I'm just very interested in picking your brain for a little bit around how you've harvested and harnessed technology to, bring some exposure to the blind spots, and optimize and, create a better working environment for your whole team. And that's the office to the vehicle to the customer.
Well,
so welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. ABC Supply, we've got 1,000 locations across the U.S. and Canada, and 7,000 of our employees are drivers. A third of our workforce are drivers. And since we've fully deployed the Netradyne system, it's really helped us give visibility back to our 1,000 managers so that they can adequately manage the safety of and performance of their drivers on a daily basis. And that's been transformative just to begin with. And one of the things that we've really appreciated from ABC is working and partnering with Netradyne to test out the latest technology. So some of the things that are planned for discussion today are new, and ABC doesn't have it yet, but we certainly will explore and likely get those installed in some of our trucks going forward. And visibility is everything. That's what we found is external cameras we have on 50 or 60% of our fleet that give us full visibility to every situation. That paired with being able to see driver performance inside the cab and outside, when you get into situations like a crash, we can see exactly what's happening. And far more frequently, our drivers doing absolutely everything right. It's helping prove and make the claims process more efficient, so that we can prove and exonerate that our drivers are doing the right thing and they should not be in trouble.
Barrett, you said something really interesting there about how most of the time your drivers are doing everything right. And I know for anyone listening, and by the way, if you have questions or comments, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them as quickly as we can. But most of the time, it's not the fault of the commercial motor vehicle operator. And most of the time, these folks are operating the way that we would like them to do in a safe and efficient manner. So there are those times where we have to do some coaching and we have to talk about it. But I mean, in your perception, Barrett, was there any surprises when you first started using the system?
Well, there was a large concern with so many locations. We're in large urban environments and out in rural countrysides. Drivers in the rural areas didn't seem to have as many concerns as those in a large urban center. In fact, I was just at our Brooklyn location a couple of weeks ago, and the concern for those drivers there was, hey, what about following distance and all these other things? And when we looked at the numbers before we even turned on the audible alerts to help them in real time improve their performance, they were far ahead of what regular branches do anyway, because they're in an environment where they have to always be alert. Otherwise, it's going to lead to an accident or something far worse. So the concern was removed pretty quickly because the drivers saw how well they were performing.
You know, I always think about the different driving environments that you have, Barrett. I mean, certainly the material that you deliver is universal in terms of growing the infrastructure of many communities. You know, and I do believe the first sort of phase of, you know, deploying a system where the drivers are now engaged and, you know, there's a lot of active collaboration. And to Adam Lane's point, you know, there's opportunities for exoneration. And but the piece that I'm really interested in, especially with your business, where, you know, it's not a standard route, right? Your deliveries are pretty diverse because, you know, as there are new job sites, you know, popping up everywhere, there's unpredictability. And I'm curious on how much your team, right, really looks at the different driving environments and tries to, you know, be dynamic in terms of your training based on, you know, what you're seeing, tight turns, backing, you know, different street, you know, topographies, you know, different traffic patterns, you know, because I think that there's this great emerging trend that happens from being analyzing data to being dynamic, you know, in time, and then eventually getting to this more predictive or more, you know, anticipatory stage. So I'm very curious on like what big insights you've kind of drawn from, you know, hey, you know, now that the vehicles are going here, I have visibility. What am I seeing? You know, I call it the blind spots.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's really interesting. I want to be clear, you know, we just finished our full deployment a couple of months ago. And I view us, you know, when talking to other Netradyne customers or people at Netradyne, that, you know, we're kind of toddlers. We're not advanced like other people. We're still learning. But that's the progress that we have to go through, right? Our old system only identified 3 things that we could really hold people accountable to based off of the way that we were using it internally. And now we have visibility, and our managers have access to be able to look at and assess the performance of the drivers in ways they've never had before. One of the things that I found that was really affirming is meeting with Netradyne, them showing us our performance statistics and seeing it compared to other customers. And it blew me out of the water. In fact, I didn't believe it. I thought it just lies, because it was all extremely positive, but we've never had that visibility. So instead of making assumptions without data, we can now make assumptions with data. And we've been using that to help curate the driver experience. One of the things that I think is most important is making sure you don't just make a giant splash into your driving pool, ease them into it. There's things you need to focus on first, the basics, right? Like going the speed limit, following distance, stop signs. The Netradyne can do all of it, but that wasn't appropriate at first for our fleet. We're going to move to, you know, advance in levels like you do in college courses, right? Right now we're at 100 level, and next year we'll get up to a 200, and we'll be extremely high performing. But it needs to be over a course of time so that drivers accept it and understand that it's there to help them.
Yeah, I do. I always feel like the more that you can kind of give back to the drivers on what you're seeing versus just telling them what you saw, I think that you know, that continues just to grow the relationship, and you know, and everyone, you know, it's teaching versus telling, right? You know, or walking through the door together versus pulling someone through, you know, and forcing them. So, no, I can certainly appreciate the speed, and the cadence that you have with drivers.
The trust aspect, Barrett. I mean, and having worked with drivers for several years, I can understand why many of them are just, whether they're over the road, regional, last mile, doesn't matter. I can understand where they kind of are a little apprehensive with change when they see these cameras. What are you going to be really looking at? And I think it's a lot of the unknown, the fear of the unknown, which impacts every single person out there. So were there any things that you did specifically that maybe helped ease them into that, and more so, like, any success story that you could share about that advent of using an AI camera?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're collecting success stories all the time, and it's great. It's really transformative. But as far as deploying to and introducing to drivers, we were very specific. We piloted for a while. We got responses, and we kind of monitored reaction of the drivers during the pilot phase. And it was exactly like you said, Adam. It was fear of the unknown. So we worked actively to driver and their experience. We would install locations and keep the cameras silent until we went through training with the managers, and then chose a date that they want to have a driver meeting and go through the talking points that we provide them, and all that stuff's kind of boilerplate. But we wouldn't turn on the audible alerts until that day of the driver introduction, because what we found is you could do it the week before, a couple of weeks before, and then people get worried about, they've been told all this stuff, how's it going to impact me? Or you have the cameras on and talking to you immediately, and they don't know what it's about. So it's really about controlling the message and making sure they understand, and that period between when they're told and when they actually experience it is as short as possible. And that led to a huge positive driver adoption experience, because they went out, they knew what the camera talking to them meant, and they had managers who were equipped to answer the questions. There wasn't this period of time for them to say, "Oh, I'm gonna lose my job because I don't drive well." And one of the things that we really focused on with them is making sure they understood that there's really a benefit to the system analyzing all of the driving period, because it's telling them what percentage of time they're doing everything great. And that's a perspective a lot of employers don't have. You only see the negative, and then you assume that's 100%, not just a small sliver of your performance.
No, and I know that I've looked at, you and I've talked about your data and the results that you've seen. Not only are I call it the severe, the risky driving, the coachable events are going down, but what you just mentioned was, what you're doing great is certainly going up. And I know that there is, things like driver star streaks, where you're catching drivers who have continuous good performance. And I always draw the analogy, Adam Lang, about like the weight loss competition, right? So if the three of us were in a weight loss competition and I lost 2 pounds and you lost 3 pounds, and, Barrett decided to do 40,000 steps a day. And, the first weigh-in, he's at, minus 20, you and I kind of get, kind of pulled out of the competition. But at the end of the competition, if we all lost weight, one of the things that you kind of always think about is, well, some of it always finds you back, right? So you lost 20 pounds, you find 5 pounds back. And that's, like, you haven't changed your behavior. You haven't been reinforced for that behavior of change. The recognition events that you talked about, Barrett, is absolutely what that is like telling the driver, hey, not only did you remove risk because you wanted to, because you're engaged in a positive way, but now that we see the sustainability of this, this new performance, which it's got to be very exciting for your team to just see that, that the whole workforce kind of organically change. How has that been sort of received within the line managers and some of the, the driver captains and, the different levels of leadership in your team?
Well, there's an example I remember a couple of years ago when we were piloting. Manager who had just gotten to the location, he's brand new, but his only exposure and understanding of the driver's performance was when they were at the yard, when they were loading and there to check in and go home for the day. And this particular driver was kind of lazy, wouldn't help out, wouldn't do all these things. But then the manager was looking at the driver's performance on the road, and he was the safest guy at the location. So instead of it being something where, hey, I assume that how you're behaving at the branch is how you must be on the road, and maybe we got to make some changes, he decided it was worthwhile to invest time managing that driver because he's the safest driver he's got there. Let's just change his behaviors at the location. So it was helpful from a management perspective there, quite a lot for that manager.
Yeah.
The visibility, and sorry to cut you off, Adam, Kahn, but like that reminds me of, when you're giving positive or constructive feedback, you always have to have some specific examples. And in times past, it's so difficult to pick out the positive. And part of that is just how we're wired as humans. We have a response in our brains that's wired to see negative for survival. Well, now we don't really need that as often as we did however many years ago, but now we're kind of wired to see that negative and pick out examples. It's the difficult part is seeing that positive and pulling that out no matter what. And I know you guys have some amazing incentive plans and ways that you kind of pull in the drivers to get them to buy into the solution, and just deal with some of the difficulties that they have on the road or at their locations with their specific jobs. I guess what I'm getting to is with positive feedback, how has that changed with, let's say, your branch managers when they approach a driver conversation? Has it really been beneficial? And I'm kind of asking it rhetorically, but maybe wanting to hear about how that improved relations as well, not just with the previous example you gave, but maybe something else.
Well, I think it's definitely requiring our managers to have more face time with the drivers. We have another position that deals with dispatching, and they're kind of the ones that are right in front of the drivers all the time. Our managers a lot of them tend to focus on sales more exclusively. And so now it's causing them to get back into the mix to be more involved. But, creating so many events, it's able to showcase the frustrations our drivers have on the road with passenger cars doing stupid things, and they can empathize with them a whole lot more than when you see something wrong. So that was part of it. But one of the things that we got to get the drivers bought in was being able to facilitate that friendly competition at the branch level. One of the most rewarding things to me early on was seeing when we gave the drivers access to the app, they had transparency to see what their score was and what events were created for them. But the most significant thing that moved the needle was that ranking piece of the main dashboard when you log in. And we worked with Netradyne to customize how our view was, because it was showing across all 7,000 drivers. I don't know if any of you play any games or anything, and it tells you you're like, 350,000th out of 5 million. Like we couldn't conceptualize that. What's that mean? And we said, our districts are around 150 to 200 drivers. If you're top in that among your peers in the area, that's really great. And we can get people looking at that to see how they're performing. And our company has a employee Facebook page that was started organically, and there's a lot of drivers on there, and they post their scores as a source of pride, frequently each month. And then you see in the comments other drivers posting their scores, one-upping each other. So when you can get drivers to go around and look at their phone and see how they're ranking, and they go around to their buddy and say, hey, I'm 20 points higher than you, or my buddy's ahead of me and I got to beat them. That's the best part about the app, I feel. It's because you can go to the page and it tells you, gives you the prescription. Here's what you should focus in on so that you can beat your buddy.
I recall a conversation I had with another customer in the driver eye community where their office shared a wall with the driver lounge. Now, I don't know if this was intentional or like just, maybe they chose it, maybe they didn't chose it, but the feedback that this particular person gave me was about 4 o'clock. I sit back and I lean against that wall and I listen. And before deploying the system to exact the environment that you're talking about, was, hey, I would always listen for hotspots that were happening, like the themes that no one wanted to tell us about. But what they shared a mirroring story of drivers coming in and saying, "Hey, what was your score today?" "Oh, my score was 875. I gotcha, I'm 880. It's the fantasy football. I beat you, in during the week, and I get to gloat for the whole week until next week, when it restarts. So, it's interesting on visibility of score. And Barrett, I wanted to kind of talk about like where technology is kind of going. I'm very aware that on your vehicles, you have, a really good view around the vehicle. And there's certainly, emerging technologies that, I think about my laptop computer, how heavy it was and how slow it was compared to my laptop computer today. Just 5 years ago, I think it was like, hey, it's 20 pounds and it, and it's lightweight. Now they're like 3 or 4 pounds and like they scream with speed. There's certainly evolutions that are I call it roadmap elements where like the visibility you have. I think that I'm really happy that the platform can start to now share more context to drivers, such as like lane visibility and object detection and rear, backing assist and blind spot assists. I'm curious in picking your brain on, as technology evolves and makes it, accessible to the whole driver community, like where do you feel like the value in that is? Obviously with your business, having less incidents, but I'm curious. I'm picking your brain on on those type of topics.
Well, I think primarily in I'm not sure every driver believes me when I tell them this, but really the opportunity this system gives us is empathy for the driver to understand how challenging it is out there on the road, to see that and put that in context when you're dealing with some areas where they can improve. And we never had an opportunity like that in the future. So in the past, and we're looking forward to expanding that and being able to have more visibility about things that are going on around the truck. Really helps, not only for risk, but it provides that layer of protection for the drivers. Because if we have visibility and they're doing everything right, then we're going to do everything we can possibly do to make sure that the driver's career is not impacted because of an unfortunate situation.
Amen. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm involved with like kind of where some of the platforms going. I'm gonna give you a wish list. Christmas is, I think it's someone told me that the ski season's about 35 days out now. Where I typically go in winter and try to fall down the mountain, there's already 3 feet of snow. So maybe the meteorologist was a little wrong there, but like if I was going to give you like one killer app that like you're thinking, hey, this, the next thing that I'm really thinking about, I'm curious to kind of pick your brain, so I can put you on the Christmas list and maybe at the the Christmas day, it comes underneath your tree there.
Oh man, well, I think I'm too in the weeds to think about a big picture flashy item. One of the things that we've always considered is this solution is very beneficial to give visibility to drivers. It's helping affirm our driver recognition program that we had established before installing Netradyne. The top performing drivers in Netradyne are also the ones who achieve our recognition program. This last year, we had just over 20% of our drivers that achieved that. And just a side note, like we were advised by Netradyne, a good fleet goal to start with was 850. And every single one of our 12 regions are well past that. I looked at last month's data. It was they were all past 900 in average, which was great. But as far as looking for things, being able to use the fender cameras to detect things and make it more efficient for our risk and claims department. One of the things that we have significant, it's not a problem, but something that we don't have visibility into is our drivers are making deliveries in heavy straight trucks and semis and trailers, and we're up in the bed a lot, moving around, and sometimes there's falls and trips and injuries that occur. Being able to have visibility and have that detected by an AI enabled camera that's facing that direction would be phenomenal.
Yeah, we're certainly starting to see, and I'm not going to name all the advanced AI terms and all that, because sometimes I know what they mean, sometimes I don't know what they mean, but we're starting to see kind of, I call it customization of search, because the platforms are continue to get more powerful and the enablement is starting to extend to just not driving habits or driving performance, excuse me. You're right. The non-driving, environment is equally, is watched and measured. Some of the things I've seen is where you can start to build out or upload video and say, hey, show me, out of this 30 minutes of video, anytime that somebody fell or that the safety corridor around my vehicle was jeopardized because of a car, or someone who wasn't wearing the right gear. So all those I think are really interesting to further modify, the protection around the driver and make sure that, the right training is done, the right equipment is provided, the right, protocols are set up. So it's certainly an interesting evolution that I see. And I'm really excited to see how that kind of evolves with your team, especially in all those scenarios you just kind of shared.
One of the things that's really been useful, and we definitely intend to use the new advancements in the search features for looking at the video more extensively, is we don't need to use this just for driver safety on the road. We've talked to our managers and said, your drivers can hit that driver initiated button if you get into a situation at the delivery job site. If it doesn't look like what we planned on making deliveries, there's things in the way and stuff like that. Your driver can hit that, and then you guys have visibility into what it looks like at the job site, and that can help you manage the delivery to be more efficient or to address issues that may occur there. So it's being able to search for that in the video is going to be highly beneficial.
Yeah. So Adam, I think you have like kind of a graphic of sort of like what that looks like, right around, where we talked about certainly side vision assist, where typically we've labeled as the areas that are hard to see on a vehicle and now become much more apparent for vehicles. And then the next slide, I think we talk about, the overall visibility about, having, this is a large tractor trailer. And I know your fleet, Barrett, is certainly diverse in the vehicle configurations, but as we wrap up, the podcast here, I always like to kind of let you have the last microphone and kind of share, like, if you were to be talking to your peers, like what couple of sentences would you leave them with, based on your experience and what you've seen, coming down the pipe here?
Well, video doesn't lie, right? And being able to show an effective 360 view to a driver about what's going on is important. But more importantly, being able to impact the real-time outcome of that event is the ultimate. So having a system that's able to identify to the driver, provide that as not something as a tool for negativity, but something to help assist them and be a guide or a extra coach in the cab so that they could prevent something terrible from happening is really necessary. Having visibility is everything.
No, that's great. Hey, Barrett, as always, I enjoy sitting down and learning and chatting with you every time that I get that opportunity. I always try to end the podcast, and then Adam Lang stops me and with his dad joke. So I'm going to allow him a couple of seconds here to throw down his dad joke, and then thank you very much for attending. So be patient and give him the courteous laugh, even though maybe you don't think it's going to be a laughable event. All right, Lang, what do you got?
Today I've got a good one. So I sold my vacuum the other day because all it was doing was collecting dust.
All right. That one, maybe a B-.
I'll do better next time, I promise.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Barrett. Thank you, Adam.
All right.